What King said about Northern liberalism. The white moderate was more of an obstacle than the Ku Klux Klaner. There is a pressing need for a liberalism in the North which is truly liberal, the relevant Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told an interracial audience in New York City in 1960. He called for a liberalism that rises up with righteous indignation when a Negro is lynched in Mississippi, but will be equally incensed when a Negro is denied the right to live in his neighborhood. On this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, it's tempting to focus on the glaring human rights abuses, racist fear-mongering and malfeasance happening at the federal level. But taking seriously Dr. King's critique of Northern liberalism means also calling out liberal public officials and residents who profess commitments to equality yet maintain a corrupt criminal justice system and a segregated school system. It means calling out Northern newspapers, along with Southern ones, to atone for their skewed civil rights coverage. And it means reckoning with the dangers of polite racism, as Dr. King warned, which still rings true today. Dr. King visited New York City throughout the 1960s and called attention to its racial problems. In Harlem in 1963, he spoke to an audience of some 15,000 white people as City College's commencement speaker. Fewer than 2% of the graduates that day were black, giving visual proof to his admonition that the de facto segregation of the North was as injurious as the legal segregation of the South. The next year, in a TV interview after the Harlem Uprising, Dr. King called for an honest, soul-searching analysis and evaluation of the environmental causes which have spawned the riots, which started after the police killed 15-year-old Jimmy Powell. Dr. King was nearly run out of town when he dared to suggest that New York would benefit from a civilian complaint review board to oversee the police department. In 1964, Dr. King refused to condemn the Brooklyn chapter of the Congress of Racial Equality's plan to create a major disruption by stalling cars on highways that led to the World's Fair at Flushing Meadows. After all, the goal was to draw attention to rampant inequality in the city, which had long been unaddressed. "If our direct action programs alienate so-called friends," he wrote in a letter to civil rights leaders, "they never were really our friends." Indeed, mainstream newspapers lauded his work in the South but took issue when he brought the same tactics north. In 1967, Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference announced the need for mass disruption in northern cities to draw attention to long-standing inequalities. The New York Times criticized the idea as certain to aggravate the angry division of whites and Negroes into warring camps, part of the paper's long history of deploring direct action on the home turf. 3 years earlier, when 460,000 New York City students stayed out of school to demand a comprehensive school desegregation plan, making it the largest civil rights demonstration of the decade, the Times called the day-long boycott unreasonable, unjustified and violent. After the Watts Uprising, Dr. King focused on the racial dishonesty of the North which showered praise on the heroism of Southern Negroes. But concerning local conditions, only the language was polite, the rejection was firm and unequivocal. The uneven attention was clear, he noted, as the nation, Negro and white, trembled with outrage at police brutality in the South. Police misconduct in the North was rationalized, tolerated and usually denied. Dr. King also highlighted white people's illegal behavior that helped produce northern ghettos. The white man flagrantly violates building codes and regulations, his police make a mockery of law, and he violates laws on equal employment and education and the provisions for civic services, he said in an address to the American Psychological Association in 1967. In his 1967 book Where Do We Go From Here, Dr. King noted the limits of Northern liberalism. Negroes have proceeded from a premise that equality means what it says. But most whites in America, including many of goodwill, he wrote, proceed from a premise that equality is a loose expression for improvement. White America is not even psychologically organized to close the gap. That still holds true. In 2014, the Civil Rights Project at UCLA found that New York State's schools were the most segregated in the nation. Low-income students of color languish in underfunded schools while wealthier students attend better-resourced ones. And white parents are still tremendously resistant to school rezoning, just as they were 50 years ago. and discriminatory policing persists. Despite Mayor Bill de Blasio's mission-accomplished narrative, police officers continue to use stop and frisk in a way that's racially disparate. Now, many of the stops simply go unreported. The police department, despite court decisions, continues to disparately monitor Muslim communities, and it has reportedly surveilled Black Lives Matter activists. At the same time, many people have condemned the disruptive tactics of Black Lives Matter activists, claiming they should be more like Dr. King. In April 1963, Dr. King sat alone in the Birmingham jail. He knew the rabid side of white supremacy very intimately. And yet he wrote that the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, was more of an impediment than the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner. For too long, order has been more important than justice. We can honor Dr. King's legacy by taking uncomfortable, disruptive, far-reaching action to remedy the problems to which he devoted his life.